Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is IFAT, Institute of Foreign Affairs and Trade. My name is Gergely Salát, Senior Researcher at IFAT. And today we are going to talk about connectivity programs in Asia. Actually, the title has Asia in it, but all those programs and initiatives that we will be talking about won't only be about Asia. They are something like Eurasian programs, including Africa, but all of them involves Asia. That's why we put Asia in the title. And connectivity is something like a buzzword. In recent years, everybody is talking about connectivity. All the great economic powers like China, like the United States and the European Union started a program for enhancing connectivity in the world, and especially in Eurasia. Just the day before yesterday, the European Commission made it public that it developed a program called Global Gateway, which is a new European strategy to boost connectivity in other countries. But we have China's BRI, we have the American Build Back Better world, and also some smaller programs. And we felt it interesting with our colleagues to make it clear what connectivity is, what motivates the powers that started all these initiatives, what is the content of these programs. Will they actually work? Are they just slogans, or are they real programs? So we will have hopefully we will have an interesting conversation about these programs that may or may not change our world in the future. My partners in this discussion is Máté Szakáli, who's a guest researcher at the Research Group for Modern East Asia at Pázmány Péter Catholic University and an expert of Southeast Asia. And Viktor Eszterhai, who is a senior researcher at IFAT, my colleague there, and he's mostly an expert on China. But of course, all three of us cover the whole world, and it's necessary. So, of course, we won't only talk about China and Southeast Asia, we will talk about these connectivity programs, all of which has something to do with China. BRI is initiated by China, and the other programs are something like a reaction to this Chinese initiative. My first question would be to Viktor. As I said, connectivity is a buzzword recently. Everybody's talking about it. Can you define what connectivity is in this modern or postmodern context? How should we understand it?
Good morning, and thank you very much, Gergely, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today. Of course, the question is not easy, how to define connectivity. So first, before I'm giving a pure definition for connectivity, I try to make an overview of this question. So I have to say that since the beginning of the 1970s, the international relation academic community and also some politicians have recognized that the unification of the world due to the more closed global economy, or in a modern sense, we can say globalization, had a significant impact on the international political processes. We live in an interconnected world and created by globalization, and this modified the classical view how states can change the behavior of each other. So due to globalization and as a result of interconnectivity, we have to say that states have to abandon the classical, one of the most classical instruments to change the behavior of other states, and this is the military option or military tools. So as a result of globalization, military conflict became, between especially major power, became something unthinkable because the cost would be too high to go to war with each other. So this opened a new field to start to think in different tools to change the behavior of each other. And of course, because we live in an interconnected world, this tool was economy. But the early approach of using economy and connectivity to change the behavior of other states has a very optimistic approach, because this reinforced the view that if we live in an interconnected world and the using war is too costly for states, this will lead to a peaceful international circumstances, and this is somehow will change the course between great powers. So the major view of this interconnected world was that we are entering to a more peaceful world, which at the same time also provide more gains for those states who participated in the integration of the global economy. And looking back from today, this seems that this very optimistic view on interdependence was a temporary phenomena. And mostly this is linked primarily to the US unipolar moment. So the US was the top of the global economy, so therefore there were no challengers. And when there is a world without challengers, this unification force of globalization was seen in a very positive side. However, as the world became more multipolar and there were some new rising actors, this interconnectivity has altered into something else. So previously this was a chance for development, but now this became this became also as a tool for other countries to interfere into domestic efforts. So the primary focus was on connectivity from the early 2010s, that this is a vulnerability, this is a dependency which gives opportunity for other actors to interfere into domestic efforts and to change the behavior of other actors. So many argues that we are entering to a new type of international system when great powers are launching connectivity strategies. They try to unite some regions under the globalized world, and within these regions they try to achieve a dominant position using a variety of tools, including setting up new institutions and direct economic influence, and building different forms of physical infrastructure to create networks. And within these networks, they try to be the hubs of their own region. So in a nutshell, I have to say that connectivity strategy is accepting that we live in a globalized world, and accepting the fact that we cannot avoid connectivity, but this connectivity should have to focus on two aims: making asymmetric relationship within connectivity, especially great powers. Major aim is to push other actors into these asymmetric forms of connectivity, because in this case they are able to change or alter the behavior of other actors. And from another point of view, they try to decrease their dependencies. I mean, great powers try to decrease their dependencies with diversifying their own dependencies. So that's a kind of a common strategy for all great powers. And many argues that we are entering to a new world when these different connectivity initiatives or strategies are clashing with each other. Of course, we are, as at the beginning, I just mentioned that connectivity is a new form for a great power relationship. We have to say that it has, of course, many elements which come from the past. Of course, nothing new that countries are using economic tools or connectivity tools to change the behavior of others. But as a strategy, due to globalization, is something, a new phenomena in international relations. And this connectivity can be used as carrots, like providing opportunity for economic gain, but at the same time, this can be also used as sticks, to punish those countries who do not want to accept the will of the great powers. In this case, they can use, for example, economic sanctions. Probably the most important case, which is well known for all of us, is the Chinese-American trade war, which proved well that how this economic connectivity was used as a weapon to change the behavior of the other actors. And this also proved that in the era of connectivity, or in the period of connectivity, countries have to give up the absolute gain. The maximum they can achieve is relative gain, or if I have to be concrete, and then this is very clear in the case of the trade war, that to achieve less less loss compared to the other great power. So if I have to define this, connectivity is a various form for especially great powers to bond with each other, bond other countries with each other. But within these units, they try to achieve asymmetric relations in order to have the ability to change the behavior of other small actors.
Thank you very much. Viktor has been talking about great powers and what connectivity means for great powers who actually started these initiatives. But most of the countries are not great powers, but they are affected by these connectivity programs. Actually, they are the field where these connectivity programs are supposed to be built. Máté, can you tell me about what these so-called small countries or in-between countries can profit from, or what danger these connectivity programs mean for these in-between countries like those in Southeast Asia or Central Asia or Africa? What is the other side of the coin? We have seen the one side, which is the great power side. What is the other side, except for receiving carrots or sticks? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I agree with Viktor. Nowadays, the mainly nation-state-driven connectivity strategies have emerged, especially in the last decade, as a core element of international politics in Eurasia. And some even claim that this new age of hyper-connectivity has begun. And in this sense, the competitive connectivity is the arms race of the 21st century. The term connectivity actually, at least the prominence of the term, may have originated in the ASEAN and Asian Development Bank debates about the improvement of cross-border infrastructures as a reaction to the global financial crisis of 2008. The term connectivity is not tied to any specific ideology or conceptual approach, so its usage and meaning and rhetoric and practice and its understandings can vary according to local circumstances. In the common understanding across Asia, connectivity also includes non-physical elements, from regional integration schemes and trade arrangements to common technical standards and internet access, and also people-to-people contacts. Its vagueness allows the incorporation of a variety of themes and aspirations. As for middle powers or countries with limited sources for hard and soft power, they gain to benefit and maximize the profits from this competitive, mainly nation-state-driven connectivity field, and try to diversify the sources of their investments and rely on major power initiatives to develop their economies in order to adapt to their economic and population growth. The way they react or either initiate such connectivity programs depend on their local circumstances and the specific interest of the countries.
Thank you very very much. Before we move on, I would like to announce to our audience that if you have any questions or comment, please enter it in the Q&A or the chat window of Zoom. And at the end of this session, hopefully our guests will answer those questions or react to those comments. The first concrete, or maybe not concrete, but very spectacular connectivity initiative was a BRI, Belt and Road, that was announced by China almost 10 years ago now. Can you tell me about the real meaning and contents of BRI, apart from what you already said about great power intentions? And can you tell me if BRI is actually working? Viktor, first.
Well, I have to say the Belt and Road Initiative is a brand which collects several projects, but at the same time, I can define it as the first comprehensively implemented connectivity strategy of any great power in the world. And this was launched in 2013 by President Xi. However, there was a very clear aim behind this strategy that in Beijing, if I understand well, after the financial crisis of 2008, they recognized that the international circumstances dramatically changing. For the Chinese Communist Party, the major aim is to keep the modernization up, so to further pave the way for modernization for China, which means that the reforms of the economy and further integration into the global economy. So in order to continue this path, they have to recognize that something new is needed because the international circumstances changed. And one of the reasons that why the situation became new after the financial crisis, that China's economic weight dramatically increased compared to others. Second, at the same time, they could see that many great powers in the West, at least compared to China, lost the difference in capacities. And this made a very huge impact on China and many of those partners of China, that now China is a relevant actor now in international relations. So China cannot maintain its decades-long low-profile foreign policy, not to openly transform its environment. So there was a request also within China and also among the partners of China that it's time now to China to do something to help the development of other countries, to be the engine of the global economy. The second major important change in the circumstances was the Obama's administration pivot to Asia strategy, which started to target China in order to somehow contain its development, especially in terms of military. So they tried to stop the further rise of China in terms of military. But of course, many in Beijing saw that this is not helping the further development of China, because the US is starting to be more hostile toward China. So the conclusion was that China have to change its foreign policy strategy, not to be low profile anymore, but try to be more active and start to formulate its international environment. So they were searching for a new strategy, which is possible to help the Chinese economy to maintain this further development, but at the same time, not to make a direct clash with the United States against great power, which is, at least in military terms, still in a hegemonic position compared to China. So Beijing decided to actively shape its environment to be more assertive. And the idea was to implement a connectivity strategy, because this was according to the major experience of the Chinese elite, that our time is globalization, and the strategy have to reflect on in globalization and interconnectivity in the international environment. And secondly, this can transform China's environment in a very peaceful way. So that's the reason that this concept, the Belt and Road Initiative, is providing connectivity for Eurasia and also to Africa. Was a new strategic direction for China. And as a brand, the Belt and Road Initiative collected all these strategic elements which relates to this strategy. If I have to prove that this is a connectivity strategy, this is very easy to just use the official documents, the vision and action of the Belt and Road Initiative. It defines that the major element of the Belt and Road Initiative is to provide 5 types of connectivity. That's policy coordination, how national and regional policies can be harmonized to each other. Second is infrastructure or facility connectivity. So this is the hard infrastructure, which are concentrated into so-called economic corridors. One economic corridor is connecting China to Russia, one China to the European Union, one to the Middle East, one India, and so on. So these are hard infrastructure, mostly roads, railways, telecommunication networks, and so on, port facilities, industrial zones, and so on. The third element is trade, unimpeded trade. So the aim was to decrease the barriers of trade within a bloc, which integrates Asia, Africa, and Europe. And the fourth element of this connectivity was financial integration. And the fifth is the people-to-people bond. So this proves very well that how China sees this as a comprehensive form of implementing a connectivity in a huge bloc. And the aim was, of course, very clear, is to creating a bloc within China can maintain these flexible and diversified networks with different projects. And within these networks, China should be the hub. And therefore, this provides an asymmetric way for China to use this capacity to influence the behavior of those smaller members of the network. So this proves quite well how this connectivity strategy was implemented via the Belt and Road Initiative. Of course, there were other aims before this classical connectivity strategy aims. Of course, China had overcapacity in its industry, and they wanted to export it. As an export-oriented economy, they have a lot of surplus, so they were seeking for opportunities to invest. So there were some other factors, but as a strategic concept, the Belt and Road Initiative, the major aim was to create these asymmetric dependencies around China within a huge bloc, which was often referred by President Xi as the biggest bloc in the world, including Europe, Asia, and Africa.
Thank you. Máté, has BRI been a game changer in Asia? Did it actually change the relations in Asia and between Asian, Southeast Asian, Central Asian countries and China? Or was it really just a brand, as Eszterhai, Professor Eszterhai said it?
Yes, Beijing spent over $700 billion on contracts and investments in recipient countries between 2014 and November 2020, with the bulk of these investments coming from policy banks such as the China Development Bank. At its best, the program mixes China's deep capital reserves, experienced infrastructure companies, and powerful state-backed banks to construct new projects quickly and at a reasonable cost. Therefore, it has been well received in Central and South and Southeast Asia. The implementation began accordingly, and it has been consequential. It had a dramatic impact on international infrastructure development. China is now a net provider of foreign direct investment flows to the rest of the world, and is already spurring more flows of goods, labor, and capital between itself and its partners, potentially creating controversies and anti-China sentiments in the receiving countries, especially in Southeast Asia. So far, most projects involve energy and infrastructure development, but there is a growing emphasis on manufacturing and even services, partly because of the demands and needs of the recipient country in South and Southeast Asia. Some ambitious projects have had to be refinanced, renegotiated, deferred, or have loans written off. The one clear economic success is the Piraeus port in Greece in terms of economic success. The other example I would like to highlight is both an example for success and criticism. That is the Kunming-Singapore Railway that connects China, Singapore, and all countries of mainland Southeast Asia. And that has become fully operational effectively today. Quantifying the exact impacts for a project, either in Southeast Asia or Central Asia for BRI is a challenge. There are no publicly stated key performance indicators for BRI, no overarching institutionalization, no formal membership protocols, no funding charters, and the timeline for development is measured in decades. In terms of perceptions, agendas, narratives about connectivity, development, modernization, and the rise of China itself, it has been a game changer, as you refer to. But of course, that's partly attributed to its successes and also to the problems BRI's expansion has created. The narrative that has took hold of the assessment of the BRI is in non-participant countries is a security narrative, saying that the BRI could have been an ideal initiative, could have contributed to global economic growth and helped fill a real infrastructure gap in Asia. But in practice, the BRI was being implemented by Beijing made the risks greatly outweigh any potential benefits. Frustration to this security view was added by the limited capability of non-Chinese companies winning or bidding on contracts, including Southeast Asian, even European and American companies. Yet while the leaders that are against the BRI decry the initiative's failings in public, in private they are more likely to worry about its ongoing successes, namely its attractiveness and its dominance over the narrative, including the middle income and low income countries. The so-called counter initiatives, they respond and try to convince low and middle income countries to participate in, although are not trying to imitate the Belt and Road Initiative. The scope, the concept, the institutional framework of or the operational mechanisms, they rather aim to provide a private sector alternative to the Belt and Road. But comparing the impacts of those, they have little so far.
Thank you. The first reaction to BRI seemed to be free and open Indo-Pacific. Actually, the whole concept of this FOIP was formulated by, I think, Japanese before BRI was initiated. But this term free and open Indo-Pacific became fashionable maybe around the middle of the past decade. it does not seem to be a similar connectivity program to BRI, but still it does have something to do with connectivity. Can you tell us what this whole concept of FOIP is about? Viktor, maybe?
Well, if you want to use the term of connectivity strategies, the major aim was, if I understand well, to create a block, an even bigger block around China, which would, of course, cannot be separated from China, but would be enough big to incorporate China. And with the size of this block, this would put pressure on China to achieve, to accept the rules of the game within this huge block. So that fits very well into the concept of connectivity, that great powers try to create blocks or zones within the globalized world in which they try to put pressure on smaller entities. And at the beginning, if I understand well, the American administration concept was that during the during the Obama administration with pivot strategy to use the regional alliance system of the United States plus the United States to put pressure on China, to use it as a tool to formulate the behavior of China. And then they figure out that's not enough. And therefore they turn toward Indo-Pacific region, which is even bigger, and with the enormous capacity of this block, and a block within China is in, it would be enough to put pressure on China to behave according to the wish of the American decision maker, if I want to be very very precise. So that's the reason I think how Indo-Pacific is and this concept is related to connectivity strategies. But of course, at the same time, the United States also have a different type of foreign policy approach, not just to incorporate its friends, but at the same time to launch something like Cold War, which goes against the concept of connectivity. So if I can be frank, I have to say that this Indo-Pacific concept is a half-hearted supported concept from the side of Washington. But of course, I would be very interested in Máté's opinion about how other states in the region see this concept.
Máté? Unmute yourself, please.
Yes, sorry. Yes, the meaning of this phrase is somewhat nebulous, and therefore its significance and prospects for realization are also unclear. The free and open Indo-Pacific is fundamentally a security concept that has been developed into strategies containing some economic elements as well in Japan and in the United States, and into a rather normative outlook by ASEAN. It is a reaction rather to China's increased assertiveness and militarization of the South China Sea. In terms of the Belt and Road Initiative, critics should suggest that Chinese-backed projects with strategic implications could in time develop civil-military dual use, such as ports around the Indian Ocean, in Pakistan, in Myanmar, in Sri Lanka, in Malaysia, in Cambodia. And from this perspective, the concept is a strategic reaction to the changing power dynamics in the Asia-Pacific, where China has increasing leverage over each of the existing and potential US security partners. And this is reflected also by the BRI's successes. Japan introduced its own concept and formally put it down a strategy in 2016. Its declared aim is to develop a free and open maritime order in the Pacific region as international public goods, bringing stability and prosperity for every country, as well as securing peace and prosperity in the region. If we compare them as competing regionalism roadmaps, the BRI focuses on both a high degree of state sovereignty based on a process-oriented perspective with focus on exact cooperation and exact goals. Japanese Free and Open Indo-Pacific stresses integration through a rational legal perspective with an emphasis on broad cooperation and state sovereignty and a shared rules-based order. There is a reactive interplane between these two that shapes their orientation and influences their focus, especially in Southeast Asia. And we can discuss that in details if you like. As for the US alternative vision for free and open Indo-Pacific, it's rather pushing for the renewal of the so-called Quad, the potential security arrangement among the 4 large democracies, India, Australia, Japan, and the United States. The charter of the Quad, however, has not yet been negotiated. When it will probably have 3 main objectives: to reinforce the existing rules-based order, to promote liberal trading regime, and freedom of navigation. In its current form, both the Japanese and US version are more or less an interagency initiatives, such as the official development assistance by Japan or the USAID organization in the US, and key bilateral and regional efforts focus on private investment-led connectivity development and solidifying America's leadership in the region. In 2 sentences, the ASEAN version of the Indo-Pacific outlook, it rather reiterates and furthers existing mechanisms of ASEAN intended to enhance community building processes and give new momentum to existing connectivity projects. So it builds rather on East Asia Summit, ASEAN Regional Forum, and ASEAN +3.
Thank you. This year, 2 maybe more concrete connectivity initiatives were announced by mostly Western countries. One is Build Back Better World, B3W. It sounds more like a German techno group from the 1990s, but it's not. It's a G7 initiative which aims to improve the infrastructure of low and middle income countries. And the same aim was announced related to this global gateway initiative of the European Union that was just started the day before yesterday. So this is a very fresh development. Actually, I haven't heard about B3W ever since it was announced. I don't know if anything happened, but how do you evaluate these Western reactions to BRI? Do you think that Western powers think it seriously that they will compete with China? Will they actually spend money on that competition, or is it just a kind of a political slogan or a part of political communications that, oh, we stand up to the Chinese? Maybe Viktor?
Of course, the major aim of this both connectivity strategy is to rival China. So that's very beneficiary from political point of view. So especially for the domestic audience, that everybody would be happy that, okay, we are providing something, an alternative for the Belt and Road Initiative. But if I want to be rude, I have to say, especially the Build Back Better initiative, it seems to be quite unrealistic. So the scope of this initiative is enormous. So they announced $40 trillion US as a total aim to achieve or implement in infrastructure connectivity till 2035. So we have to understand this. I mean, the size of this huge money, is double the size of the United States GDP. So this seems extremely unrealistic that this can be implemented, especially if you think about the Biden administration problem with accepting its own infrastructure development project at home. This seems to be, I would say, quite unrealistic. But there are some other problems what I would like to raise, because money is of course important. Of course, it's very important. But there are some other problems with these two connectivity strategies. And I would say the European initiative, which is targeting 300 billion euro till 2017 to finance EU infrastructure projects abroad, is more realistic. Because the scope is way smaller, so I see it more realistic. But the major issues are probably not the money. The positive side of the story is that both the United States, the G7 countries, the European Union understands our times. So we live in a globalized world. This goes contrary to this Cold War style of foreign policy, especially for the United States, which tries to enforce countries to decouple from China. So I think connectivity is a much better alternative to do something with China at least. Second, I would say this is good to see that EU is confident also, so they can act as a global actor. So I also put this in a positive side. So not just to say that okay, whatever happens, I try to survive, but they try to formulate its own environment. So and I think that's also very positive. And I don't see that competition between connectivity is a necessary problem. The issue is here, if I understand the situation well, that in the Western countries, we have a very simplistic view of connectivity. So the issue is not who is actually building connectivity, but the major question that what it connects. So what it connects connectivity, because the major advantage of the Belt and Road Initiative that it connects China. China is a major source of import for many countries. China is a huge industrial superpower. China is a very big market. So the case of the Belt and Road Initiative, connecting something to China is very realistic. The major issue is what are these Western initiatives going to connect with each other? So especially the Build Back Better project. So if these are connected to underdeveloped countries, probably the effect will be quite small. If this is connecting an economic center to something, this can have a bigger economic impact. So that's a major issue, that what are these initiatives are going to connect with each other, and if they are able to provide a good answer for this, this could be successful initiatives. But at the current level, I see the major focus is on that. Okay, European or American companies should build the infrastructure, but this is lesser. This has a lesser importance, of course. In a short term, it's important, but in the longer term, the connectivity what really matters. Secondly, the Belt and Road Initiative has a much broader vision of connectivity than these two initiatives. The Build Back Better and also the Global Gateway is focusing on infrastructure and connectivity. But at the case of Belt and Road Initiative, I just listed the 5 major forms of connectivity. And I think this comprehensive view of connectivity is badly needed for these both Western or mostly Western initiatives. There is also another problem that the Build Back Better and also the Global Gateway initiatives are arguing that we need quality infrastructure. And this is what they are going to promote for the developing countries. But the major issue in developing countries is that they lack of financial sources. So for them, a very high quality, high standard infrastructure project could be unaffordable. So this is also a problem. So I find hardly competitive the Western infrastructure constructions compared to China, because China has a huge experience in building infrastructure, for example, in Africa or in the developing parts of the world. And they are not just building. I mean, Chinese companies are not just building in these parts of the world with the Chinese government funding, but also working in many cases for the World Bank and some other participating in those kind of other international projects, which provides them opportunity to have experience on the spot. There are also one more thing what we have to discuss here, that the argument to counter the Belt and Road initiatives that probably Beijing have some hidden expectations with these projects and hidden aims, but this is also clearly stated in the case of the Build Back Better and also Global Gateway Initiative. They try to strengthen democracy on those countries which will receive projects. But we have to again see that what is the target of these projects, of course, are the developing countries. And in many cases in these developing countries, the status of democracy is questionable. And I would say in many cases, some of these countries, these terms would not necessarily be attractive. So this should be also think it over. And one more thing probably is that both Western initiative are focusing on the private financing part of these initiatives. And the issue is that in our world, financing is not necessarily a problem, but finding good projects are the issue. So including private financing probably would be not, so for private companies, this would be too risky to go to developing countries. So this would be implemented in a very smart way, how these private financing and private companies can be channeled in projects which would serve the interest of the Western countries. So that's also a very, very tough question. So probably it would be time to think it over, that connectivity should not necessarily compete with each other, but in many cases they would complement each other. And probably some of these Western initiatives would be more beneficiary if they would find a cooperation together with China. So that could be more productive in order to formulate the behavior of the developing countries, especially to formulate the behavior of China. So that could be also part of the picture to discuss this strategic scope that, or strategic aim, that if we really would like to change the behavior of China, maybe cooperation, and especially in connectivity strategy, provides a field for cooperation to use it to change the behavior of China.
Máté, can we hear your opinion about these Western initiatives?
Thank you. Yes, I agree with Viktor. If I can add, I should point out that the Belt and Road Initiative's appeal and lending has declined over recent years, and this trend are likely to have been extended by the pandemic. So this funding decline creates a gap that a well-funded, determined connectivity program could exploit. I agree, this is an uphill task for the EU and for the US as well. But according to the Asian Development Bank, fiscal reforms in participating countries, like reducing the risk of corruption and mismanagement, could help bridge about 40% of Asia's infrastructure financing gap. But the remainder depends on the private sector, which would need to increase its funding by about 300% compared to current levels. The problem, this is channeling capital from institutional investors such as insurance companies and pension funds, as the EU and the US and the G7 countries aim to, is a traditionally preferred form of financing infrastructure development by the multilateral banks like the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank. So the concept is not new and not necessarily a one without potential. Also, the problem is not the liquidity, but rather that the private investors balk at the risk of of projects in emerging market infrastructure deals, because they usually entail project delays, political interference, corruption, and mismanagement. And in recent decades, there have also been developments in public-private partnership approaches to infrastructure. Today, companies rather prefer operating to constructing these infrastructure projects. And as Viktor mentioned, the idea of building high-quality infrastructure creates tensions between aims of infrastructure quality and geo-economic influence. China opted for the influence and resulted in lesser high-quality infrastructure projects. The West aims to opt for the high-quality infrastructure, and as a result, it expects, at least in theory, less geo-economic influence. In terms of the EU's Global Gateway strategy, I think it's, at least compared to the G7 initiative, it starts from a rather naive view of geoeconomy. As long as China runs a trade surplus around 540 billion euros a year with the West, the Global Gateway initiative to invest 60 billion euros a year will remain insignificant compared to China. Also, the Belt and Road Initiative follows shifting production chains. So as long as Europe does not work to create its own fourth industrial revolution industry capacities, China will continue to attract more participation from middle and low-income countries. And as for the European Union initiative, I think the main aim for Brussels with the Global Gateway is to provide an impetus for member states and companies to do more on their own. And this is often the case with European Union initiatives. And it depends on the interest of the companies. So many European companies are fine with working with the Chinese companies and with Chinese contractors. And they are happy even to then in exchange for Chinese contractors do the heavy lifting. But the problem is that the Chinese money is more tangible today than that of Japan, Europe, or the EU. So the European plan remains a matter of intentions, I think. The Build Back Better world seems more plausible, at least to me. The implementation will be the decisive factor, whether it is able to counter China's initiative.
Thank you. The time is almost over. So if anybody has questions or remarks, please put it in the Q&A and chat session. But before that, I would like to have a last question, and I expect rather short answers. Can you tell me about your personal evaluation about the prospects of this competition between the Chinese Connectivity Initiative and the Western Connectivity Initiative? Can you make some forecast whether we will have a world soon in which all roads lead to Beijing, or will the participants of this competition will sooner or later realize that it is better for all of them if they work together and try to complement each other instead of rivalry? Viktor?
I think the most roads will connect Beijing and the European Union, because this has the most economic rational element. So I would say that the European Global Gateway project and the Belt and Road Initiative will find a way to not to compete with each other, but to find the common points. So I think this is quite realistic, and especially for a small country like Hungary, that would be the best opportunity to somehow be a hub within this integrated block or within a network. Of course, it's not necessarily unrealistic, because I'm not saying about hard infrastructure. There could be other fields to find a place, but this would also be so this would be a very important homework for the Hungarian government as well, to start to think also in these connectivity platforms, connectivity strategies, to understand the time of our day. Thank you.
Máté, who would you bet for, China or the West, in terms of connectivity?
If we see it from a geo-economical standpoint and not geopolitical one, it can be a not zero-sum game. But without proper coordination, the different initiatives may not mesh well together, although there is room for cooperation. I think we stressed it a lot. And there are cooperation between China and Japan in Indonesia, Philippines, Cambodia. So there are examples of that. The various subregions of Asia have long been regarded as the least integrated ones in the world. So in terms of infrastructure development and other areas of connectivity, there is room for the countries to maneuver between these initiatives, and also for the initiatives to coordinate and cooperate, at least on the local levels, case by case. I think there are paradoxes because of the dimensions of vertical and horizontal connectivity programs, and it can create paradoxes. But if countries, small and medium-sized countries, employ some tactics like limited balancing, limited band bargaining, direct engagement, they can benefit, and also the initiative countries can benefit from these initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we turn to the questions of the audience. We have two so far, both from Wang Xiaoping. The first is related to our discussion, and this says, how RCEP will impact the business between main Asian countries and Europe, or CEC, as it will start from 2022. Who would like to answer that question?
Well, the EU has a growing trade connection with the RCEP signatories. China, Japan, and South Korea are not the only major trading partners for the EU. The EU has signed free trade agreements with, I guess, 4 signatories, and is negotiating with 5 others. So the EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment was concluded last year, but it's not codified yet. I think greater connectivity and the RCEP might have a beneficial impact in terms of trade volume in goods and services, and in terms of market opening. The exact impacts are hard to quantify because of the pandemic and because of the specific comparative advantages of the countries participating in it. But of course, it's I think it will be a supported and a welcomed agreement to take into effect.
Thank you, Viktor. Do you like to add anything?
RCEP is going to be the biggest economic bloc in the global economy, so yeah, that has a potential for the European Union. We especially see the potential in the term of services. So I think there would be a lot of opportunity to deepen cooperation regarding services between these 2 huge regions. So if something a kind of a channeling force of cooperation between the EU and the RCEP would be beneficial is definitely, at least from the European side, is the term of services.
Thank you. And one last question, which is not really related to connectivity, and we are not Hungary experts, so our opinion is not very professional, but the question is interesting. What is your idea of the relationship between China and Hungary after the new election of Hungary in next year? I guess there are, two options. One, the Orban government stays, and the other, the Orban government goes. Can you make some forecast about China-Hungary relations for both the options?
I guess it's for me.
No.
Okay. Also for Máté.
Máté,
I give it to you.
Okay. Yes, I think maybe relations between Hungary and China. I don't expect fundamental shift in the main trajectory. There are certain projects related to the Belt and Road Initiative that are controversial in Hungary, and the opposition can capitalize on some anti-China, anti-Chinese sentiments. Although the main arena for Hungarian foreign policy is the EU and the NATO, we are full members of both of these organizations. Responsibilities. And the EU has exclusive jurisdictions in some foreign policy areas, like trade policy. During the Orban government, there has been a seemingly spectacular improvement between Hungarian and Chinese relations. The opposition states that it creates an unfair and one-sided dependency on part of Hungary. I'm not really an expert on this matter, so I can't decide or declare whether it is accurate assessment or not. If the opposition wins next year, the main pillars of the relationship will remain, I guess, the same. Some projects will be renegotiated, perhaps, related to Budapest-Belgrade Railway or the Fudan University campus. But I don't expect that these possible renegotiations will not happen behind closed doors. So I can't predict on the results of them.
Thank you. Viktor?
I fully agree that there are two major forces here. The domestic element is crucial and the external as well. I agree absolutely with Máté that, yeah, the domestic forces and the opposition parties and the current government's China vision is quite clear. The bigger question for me, the external environment. It seems so obvious that we are somehow entering to a new type of a Cold War, but I'm always challenging this type of concept because due to connectivity and interconnectivity. So if we can go back to our major question for today, I would say interconnectivity and connectivity in itself is challenging this idea that we are necessarily entering to a new type of a Cold War. So there will be huge tensions, of course, but I think the cost to cut the ties with China would be extremely high, and we don't able to predict what would be the real cost. So maybe we will take steps toward in this road. I mean, especially in the West. But the price will be extremely high, and then later maybe this direction will be changed to simply go forward this hostile relationship between the West and China. If I can add one more thing, if strictly focusing on connectivity, a small country's major aim is to deepen connectivity with every actors. So you can have the maximum gain with diversifying your economic relations, at the same time trying to make yourself a hub. Again, not necessarily I'm talking about the hard infrastructure, but there are other types of being a hub. Like you can be a cultural center, educational center, or whatever. So maybe for a small country, it's necessary to think in connectivity. And in this case, the aim for small countries is to be in diversified networks. So that's my short opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Máté Szakáli and Viktor Eszterhai for sharing their thoughts with us on the difficult concept of connectivity. And I would also like to thank all the members of the audience who were here with us in an online form. I hope you will come to our next event as well. This was one of the online events of IFAT, Institute of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Thank you for your attention and goodbye. Have a nice day. Have a nice weekend.